Well, happy Thursday. I am in Charlotte at the movement corporate headquarters. And I know Megan and I were both saying, the weather's kind of rainy, didn't sleep that well last night. There's a lot of stress and pressure and negativity in this market. So we're going to talk about all of that and more, because why not? I'm wading through, it's like wading through the weeds in a swamp. I'm wading through all of the arrows coming at us and the negativity to find all those nuggets of gold, all those opportunities to talk to our clients, to be the beacon of light, to actually help somebody get into home ownership. Because right now is such a hard time, and it's such a great time to create those opportunities. So that's where my quote came from this morning. It came from our ability or our need to do things differently, to think outside the box. We cannot keep doing what we've always done and expect different results. We know all that. But I went back to Dr. Seuss because you just kind of have to when the weather is like this. So it goes, think left, think right, and think low, think high. Oh, the things you can think up if only you try. So I just want, because what day starting out with Dr. Seuss isn't a better day? So this is the market to just continue to be creative, to think outside the box, to meet your clients where you're at, and to really help them envision a 2024 that's better than their 2023, that continues to create opportunity and fortune through the power of real estate. And I know no one loves that more than Megan and myself.
That's great. I love it. Yeah, definitely. This is the time to gear up for 2024 and make sure that you're getting all of your ducks in a row so that you have an outstanding first quarter.
Yes. And you can, right? I mean, the market is definitely going to throw us some hurdles, but this can be a phenomenal setup and tee up the fourth quarter this year to first quarter next year.
Definitely. Well, as you guys were following along last week, we did announce that there are going to be some changes to the way that we have to put together the report and the presentation going forward. And so unfortunately, what we have to do in order for the system to work and function appropriately is that Nicole and I are actually parting ways at the end of this month, and we're going to go on solo doing our own webinars and events going forward. The reason why is because I have a database that hooks into a specific Zoom account that's on a platform for First American that will tie into my database that will allow me for a better follow-up on that. But in order to use that platform, I can't bring on anyone that I do business with because it's seen as an inducement. And so unfortunately, I'm not able to participate anymore after we start this. So that will be going forward in November 1st. Look for more messaging on that as we get into the beginning of next week, and I will send out an email. It's also going to change the way that you access the reports. And so the other thing that came about was about a year ago, I sat down with the MLS and I said, hey, I understand there's been a rule change that deals with the way that I'm extracting the data from your system. As you know, I put together about 1,200 pages worth of research every quarter for agents to use to better advise their buyers and sellers. And when I showed them how I was going about everything, the rule change was that you could export 5,000 records at a time. Well, now it's 500 records is the amount that you're allowed to pull out. And so in any given week, I'm pulling like 25,000 listings at any given time in order to put together the analysis. And so my data feed has to change from that as a real estate agent into a data feed, which is substantially more expensive. The other problem with that is that I can't just eat the cost of the data feed in order to continue to provide the reports. As a title insurance rep, I can't give you an item of value for the request of business. And so what I have to do is charge for the report, and we've tried to keep the charge for the report low, but it's going to be $10. And in order to access that, you're going to have to go through our First Ignite RE platform, and it will be underneath our marketing tile where you will be able to go in and access that. There will be more information in a sign-up sheet so that you can gain access into First Ignite RE, but it's an invitation from your account rep. And so if you know who your account rep is at First American Title, please reach out to them and they can get you set up so that there's no disruption after November 1st in order to continue your reports. After that, we'll get some more messaging out so that we have a sign-up sheet so that you guys can get access to that. But that's kind of what's happening with all of the reports and everything else that's going on in order to stay compliant with all of the rules and regulations. So hopefully that helps everybody out and gives some clarity as to what's going on in the marketplace. But I did go through and I got the monthly report completed for you. this last week, and I sent that out on Tuesday. I think I sent it out on Tuesday this week. This week's been kind of a blur, and I'm sick on top of it. And so I'm fuzzy with cold medicine and too much caffeine and all the good stuff. And so I wanted to go through and show you that we're actually right about where we're supposed to be, with the exception of a couple of metrics. And so, as you know, I go through and I put together baselines, and I put my baselines together based off of 2013 through 2019. And the reason why I do that is because we have similar levels of supply and demand as a ratio to each other, which is called month supply of inventory. And I exclude the pandemic years because those are extreme markets. That were not common in our marketplace. But 2013 through 2019, you could basically set your watch to the market and had a really nice ebb and flow to it. And so I'll go ahead and pull up that report for you guys so that you can see what I'm talking about in terms of the report overall and where we're benchmarking. And so this is for the month of September. And for the sake of time, I just kept it with detached single family, but the numbers report very similarly when we're talking about the attached markets as well. And so this graph shows our baseline in black from 2013 through 2019 of all of our active inventory, what the average active count was each month going forward from 2013 through 2019. Historically, we have very low inventory for the first 3 months of the year. Starting in April, we start to see gains in active inventory. And then usually by the time that we hit October, November, and December, people are pulling or withdrawing their listings from the market in order to relist them in the following spring. And so looking at these numbers here, what you can see is that we are short on inventory from where we were. I've had a lot of agents reach out to me and say, oh my gosh, there's so much inventory. And I'm like, historically, there actually isn't. We're down by about a third of what we would typically have at any given point during this time. And so we would typically have in the month of September about 6,400 available homes for sale, whereas we only have about 4,600 available homes for sale. We are starting to note that expireds and withdrawals are starting to increase in favor of waiting until next year to go ahead and relist their home in the spring when the market heats back up again after President's Day weekend. Notably, this is pending transactions. Pending transaction counts have also been down this year. And so looking at pending transactions, historically, we start to put more and more units under contract going from January through May. That in June, we start to go into our retraction phase where there are fewer units going under contract. And so historically, in the month of September, we put about 3,200 units under contract, whereas this year we only put 2,200 under contract. So again, off by roughly a third in terms of what we would actually end up seeing for pending transactions. Now, looking at our closed count is even down further. And the reason why the closed count is down further is because we have currently a 25% fallout rate for units going back on the market after going under contract once. And so I had a long conversation with all of my closing teams, and I said, so contracts are falling apart right now. Can you give me any insight as to why they're falling apart? Is it inspection? Is it appraisal? Is it loan conditions? And they said it is absolutely everything from earnest money simply not showing up. We had one terminate where the buyer legitimately said that they just had cold feet and they gave back their earnest money, but they're falling apart for all reasons. There isn't really any rhyme or reason right now why they're falling apart or one specific item, but some of the inspection objection lists that I'm getting back are crazy long. And so work on negotiating those and be prepared for that by doing a pre-inspection on your home before listing it to try and correct some of those errors beforehand. But our closed count, historically, we put about 3,200 units under contract, whereas this year we put about 2,100 units under contract. And so that's just looking at our counts, but our ratios are actually right about where they're supposed to be. The only difference is our market is a lot smaller this year. Year to date, we've closed roughly about 2/3 of what we would historically close by this time year to date. And so usually in any given year, we put about 60,000 units into the closed status each year, whereas right now we're up to about 37,000 closed units for the year so far. This shows month supply of inventory as our baseline from 2013 through 2019, and we've actually outpaced the market, and the market has been tighter than what we had noted historically. Specifically in the months of March, April, and May, we were below, and February, we were below our month supply of inventory, whereas historically we would see a higher level of supply in our marketplace, or that higher ratio of buyers to sellers in our marketplace. And getting into September, historically we see about a 2-month supply of inventory. Right now we're at 2.1 months worth of overall inventory. So we're not too far off from where we should be. So what's interesting is that not only did demand drop, but supply dropped as well. People want to stay in their homes. People are only moving this year because they have to move and not necessarily because they want to move. And so inventory is low, demand is low, but proportionally they dropped in relation to each other. And so we're looking at overall right where we're supposed to be. Supply in months tends to drop off as we get into October, November, and December. Sellers seem to be really hanging in there this year. The sellers that are in the market are the sellers that have to sell, and they're willing to negotiate. I went through and I pulled an analysis for you that was in my write-up that I sent out on Tuesday to you that talked about the amount of concessions that we're seeing in the marketplace right now. And of the closed transactions in September, it was 59.7% of all the homes that closed in the month of September offered a concession. And when I looked at what they were offered the concession for, it was an overwhelming 45% of that 60% that offered concessions ended up offering those towards points paid down or towards closing costs. And so sellers are willing to negotiate and help get those rates bought down so that those rates aren't quite as scary as they had been. The average size of a concession was about $9,000 when I averaged everything out for Metro Denver. So there's some new little tidbits of information for you that you guys can use when you're talking with your clients. Looking at where we are for the odds of selling, this is basically where I take into account all of the available listings for sale versus those that go under contract and or close in the same month and project it forward for a 30-day period of time. But we were actually had a higher and better odds of selling in 2022 than what we averaged from 2013 through 2019 for the first 6 months of the year. Then headed into July, we noted our seasonal retraction. We were right on pace with where we should be with a 52% overall odds of selling. August was actually a little bit better by about 1%, where we came in at a 51.6% odds of selling. And then in September, we dipped down ever so slightly. We were off by about 2% from where we should be for the overall odds of selling. The odds of selling tends to stabilize as we get into October, November, and December. So hopefully that's what we'll be keeping an eye out for as we go into the next couple of months. Looking at where we should be for average days on market, we were a little bit high headed into January and February from those listings that came on market back in December, but not too far off from where we should be historically with about 49 average days on market. Then they started to dip down into March where we saw 39 average days on market. April came right on pace. And then in May, June, and July, we were actually below the average of where we should be for average days on market. August was about right on pace with 25 versus 26 average days on market. September came in at 1 day longer, where we typically see 28 versus 29 days on market, and days on market tends to stretch out as we get into October, November, and December. Median days on market, not too far off from where we should have been, with the exception of the first couple months of the year. Slow start coming out of the gate in January and February with longer median days on market. Then we dropped right back into where we should have been. For March, April, May, we were actually faster than the average. June was right on pace. July was 1 extra day. August was on pace, and September was 1 day longer. So we were right on pace with where we should have been once we got our rhythm back in March when the market started to pick back up again. Now this shows the percentage of units that are under contract in 7 days or less. We had an interesting foible here back in April. I can't remember if we had a bunch of snow that happened over that particular month, but April was kind of a weird month where we ended up seeing fewer units going under contract in that first weekend. But May was right on pace with where we should have been. We were slightly lower in June, about 3% off in July. August, we came in about 3% lower. And again, back into September, we were only off by less than 1% with where we should have been for units going under contract in 7 days or less. We were pretty much on pace with what was to be expected throughout the entire year. This graph shows how prices ebb and flow going through each monthly cycle in our Metro Denver real estate market. The way that you read this graph based off of the average sold price, if the price is going up month over month, the bar is above the zero mark. If the bar is below the zero mark, that means that it's going down month over month. And so historically in February, we see prices increase by 1%. This year, they increased by a whopping 4.1%. Then in March, they typically go up 4.2%. They only went up 2% this year. Then in April, 3.5%. Historically, this year we saw 3.1%. Then in May, they usually go up another 1.4%. We got another 2.9% up. Then in June, historically, we see 1.1%. We saw 1.7% this month. Then in July, we end up noting retraction. And again, there's that shift between supply and demand as the market eases heading into the late summer months, where historically our home prices fall back on average 5%. Well, this year, they only fell back about 4%. So we didn't have as much of a significant retraction period. In September, we usually see a 2.1% price drop. This year, we saw 2.6. So again, excuse me, pardon me again, my cold. A little bit more in September than what we would have liked to have seen. And then headed into October, November, and December, prices tend to roughly stabilize. Looking at our close to list price ratios, we were below the average headed into January and February. And then getting into March, we came right back on pace with where we should have been, and even beating the averages in April, May, and then in June came right back in line with where we should have been. July at 100%, right on track. August slipped a little bit. We were supposed to be at 99.7. We were at 99.5. And then in September, same thing, 99.3. We came in at 99.2. But notice how that number starts to come down as we get into October, November, and December. Again, guys, the sellers that are in the market right now are serious and have to sell. They are willing to negotiate in order to get under contract. I would much rather, as a buyer, get something under contract in the fourth quarter rather than waiting until the spring to get something under contract, because you'll likely be back into those markets where we see bidding wars that are driving prices back up again. Looking at where we should be for units with price reductions, this one is a little bit different this year than what we've seen historically. There are more price reductions this year, and the price reductions have been larger. Again, the sellers that have to sell this year really do have to sell, and they're willing to come down in their price for it. Back in January, we saw significant price reductions, whereas historically we see 37.2% making a price reduction. This year we saw 57.3% make price reductions. In February, we saw 29.5% make price reductions, whereas this year it was nearly, not quite double, but 43.8% made price reductions. In March, we saw about 9% more price reductions. Getting into May, we saw about 5% more price reductions, about 6% more price reductions headed into June, about 6% more price reductions in July, just over 5.9% more price reductions in August, and about 4% more price reductions headed into September. The rate of price reductions tends to increase, and we have noted that in our weekly report going into October, November, and December. And so we expect there to be more price reductions as people get serious and really dig their heels in for wanting to sell headed into the fourth quarter. The size of the price reduction has also been larger overall this year. And so looking at January, historically, we see about a 5.5% price reduction, whereas this year we saw a whopping 7.6% price reduction headed into January. In February, it was about 5.4%, whereas this year was 6.6%. Into March, we saw a 5.3% price reduction historically, whereas this year it was 6.3%. Then in April, about a 5% price reduction, whereas this year we had about a 5.4% price reduction. And then in May, we actually saw fewer price reductions than what we've historically noted, whereas we saw a 4.8% price reduction historically. Now we're at 4.7%. In June, price reductions were on the rise again. We saw a 5.3% price reduction, a 5.4% price reduction into July. Now we're up to 5.6 and 5.7% price reduction. I expect the size of price reductions to continue to grow as we go into the next couple of months for those sellers that really want to sell their homes this year. And so this report, all of these graphs are based off of the attached and detached residential reports. You'll find them sprinkled throughout those reports in each section. So go ahead and take an eye out, a look out for those as we get into, as I send those out to you later this afternoon. They're probably going to go out around 1 or 2 o'clock today, this afternoon. I do have the quick weekly reports for you, so I'll go over those super fast for you before I turn it over to Nicole at 10:30. And so here is the weekly report, and this goes from October 4th through the 10th. And so keep in mind at the very first slide, I went through and rewrote this overall so that you guys could have some new updated talking points as you're putting together your video reels. But what a lot of agents do with this is they take it and load it into ChatGPT and have it prompt them to write a 90-second reel so that you've got social media content to go out there based off of these talking points. And it's a quick copy paste in order to get those out there. Looking at all price ranges, headed into our strategy sheet and our weekly analysis, we ended up noting that this week ended up cooling, and it was even cooler than what we experienced over Labor Day weekend. It was kind of a holiday weekend this last weekend with Indigenous Peoples Day on Monday. It was a bank holiday. My kids were still in school though, so I don't know that I count it as a regular 3-day holiday weekend. A lot of schools are heading into fall break starting next week, and so we may see a lull as people start heading out of town for fall break this next week going into the weekend. Our average daily active count was basically flat this week, up by about 0.6%. So there were 6,927 total units available for sale. In the next couple of weeks, we should start to see that number come down if we go back seasonally on trend with what we've been experiencing. But I've had a lot of people reach out to me and say, gosh, sellers are under the impression that there's just a ton of inventory out there. And again, historically, we just went over that. There isn't really historically a lot of inventory out there. Usually as we get into October, we have just under 9,000 available units for sale when I looked back from 2013 through 2019. So we're actually very shallow on inventory this year. New listing activity increased 1.6% week over week with 987 total units coming to market. There were 273 units that came back on market, no change from last week. Again, it's harder to get listings to stick once they go under contract. Expireds came down week over week. Withdrawals were up by about 2%. Pending transaction count fell by 7%, and closed transactions fell by about 42.6%. Don't be too alarmed by that number. Keep in mind, the bulk of our closings end up happening towards the end of the month and not necessarily at the beginning of the month. And so we have fewer closed transactions that happen at the beginning of the month. Month supply of inventory went up week over week by 8.1%. We're now sitting at 2.1 months worth of overall inventory. Something to note is that is higher than what we saw 1 year ago by about 16.7%. So again, expect a slower fourth quarter and be preparing your sellers to be spending more time on the market. The odds of selling this week ended up declining pretty drastically by about 4.5%. So the odds of selling ended up being 41.9% this last week. And again, that dropped down to below where we were over Labor Day weekend. Hopefully that number pops back up again and gets back on trend with what we've historically seen. We're still far from a market imbalance. If we had a 6-month supply of inventory, we would need to have about 19,500 total listings available for sale in order to offset demand. That means that we're sitting at about 35.2% of our overall balanced market. Total showings last week actually increased this last week, where we ended up seeing that the total number of showings went up by 4.5% with just over 11,000 total showings that were set. That means that you're getting about 1.6 shows per property per week. So if you're not getting 1.6 showings per property per week, that may be indication number one that you need to go through and make a price reduction on your listing. Conversely, the number of shows to contract went up. So people were out looking, they just weren't putting stuff under contract this last weekend. And so we ended up seeing that it was about 15 showings to go under contract. So that means that if you've had a total of 15 showings and no offers, it may be time to consider a price reduction at that point. Median days on market went down. And so we were looking at overall about a 10% reduction in median days on market. Median days on market was about 19 headed into this week. And we're going to compare that to 1 year ago. That's actually down by about 5%. And so half the homes were under contract in 19 days. So if you've been on the market for 19 days or longer, now it may be time to consider a price reduction. Looking at where we are for our overall market in price decreases for units that went under contract last week, we ended up seeing that price decreases went up by 4.2%. We saw 49.6% of units going under contract that made price reductions. 0.7% increased their price, and 49.7% remained unchanged in terms of their overall price in the marketplace. So price reductions are on the rise. Looking at the size of the price reduction, it was actually a little bit smaller this week. The average price reduction was about 5.6% off of the original price, or about a $40,000 price reduction from that original price to get it to go under contract. This report is also broken out into $500,000 price segments, so you can zip to your portion of the report and you can see how that overall market is performing. I will get all of that out to you about 2 o'clock later this afternoon, so that you guys all have your copies of everything. Looks like we've got one question. How can one get an accurate estimate on the number of active buyers per active listing on average? You know what, there really isn't any way to know how many active buyers are out there in the marketplace right now. The best gauge that I have for market activity is looking at those shows to contracts or shows per listing in order to see what that buyer pool looks like right now, and based on our pending transaction count activity right now. And so unfortunately, there's really no way to tell exactly how many of those there are out there right now. Well, Nicole, I wrapped up a little bit early. You get 4 extra minutes today. You're on mute.
I don't know how you did that. You had plenty of information to go through. So overall, I guess before I jump into the economy, what would you say, what would be the one thing that you would tell a buyer and one thing you tell a seller in this market with all the data that you've got?
You know what? This market is basically on pace with what we've seen historically. And so I hear a lot of people concerned about what's happening into the fourth quarter. And the only major difference is I'm so sorry, guys, gross, is that our market is a lot smaller this year than what we've experienced before. And we're seeing more price reductions. But the likelihood of a property selling, month supply of inventory, average days on market, the unit number of units going under contract in the first weekend, closed to list price ratios, all of that is right on pace with what we seasonally expect to see. And so I'm not too concerned about what's going to happen into the fourth quarter, other than the overall volume of transactions that are happening right now.
Agreed. And we did have more comments, a few more, just saying that we'll miss you guys together and asking if you were going to continue. And I answered that you were.
It's a bummer. It's a bummer.
It's so important, guys, that you continue to not only listen to Megan, but also engage on the economy, on the lending aspect. We're going to be rolling out. I'm really excited about some of the social things that we're doing and the hyper focus on videos. Of course, we'll continue doing Agent Ignite. The next big thing is coming out February 1st. And I've got something up my sleeve that I'm really excited about, that we're going to be hitting the market right where we need it most going into 2024. So we'll be talking about that over the fourth quarter. But needless to say, the bottom line is ultimately you want to partner with partners who understand your business. You want to have a team that's around you and your clients that you know is going to get not only the stellar level of service, but they understand what's happening in the market. You don't want your title rep or your lender scaring your buyers or sellers right now. You want somebody that understands that we're going through what we're going through and how we're going to come through it. Because honestly, next year could still have its fair share of challenges. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And so it's really up to you on, do you continue to hold on to what we all hoped for? What we all hoped for was based on inflation, that we thought the rates were going to come down in May. And then we thought about the continued inflation dropping, that we might see a drop in rates in the fall. And what we're seeing is a break between the tie of inflation and the 10-year treasury. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what that is and why that tie has been broken. Not to say that we didn't all do a decent job of forecasting, but when you've got banks failing and you've got wars ensuing and you've got other impeding factors, it just is what it is. And so at this point, we have to acknowledge the truth at which we're working within, and then figure out how to redo or recapitalize on business opportunities in this market. And then if rates drop, well, that's a massive bonus for everybody. But don't build your business based on hope. Build your business based on our current market, and then you'll only be the winner if it changes. Megan, am I cutting out at all? Can you hear me? You can hear me?
So I can hear you. I can't tell. I'm watching the live stream on my phone right now. And so it doesn't look like it's cutting out on the live stream on social media, but it is cutting in and out a little bit as I can hear it. Are you guys hearing that too?
And I think from my perspective, you're cutting in and out a little bit, but from your perspective, it might be me. So that's kind of where we don't know.
Yeah.
All right.
I think that the video looks good on social media.
Okay. All right. So you guys are kind of seeing Megan cut out a little bit right there, but all right. So we're going to keep going. Thank you for jumping in, Becky and Taylor and Alan. All right. So we're going to drop out of here and we're going to keep going on. So I'm going to share my screen. We're going to talk about what's going on in the economy. Super important that you keep your arms around that you tune in, that you subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already, or on our Instagram. That's where we're going to be posting a lot more reels and a lot more video and educating. And then we're going to be doing some things for our referring partners, making sure that we're engaging, training up their entire teams, and making sure that we're going to market with all the top programs. So let's jump into sharing our screen, because there's plenty to talk about. And then I want to give you some creative conversations at the end, talking about some updates in the lending world, as well as some conversations that you can be having right now based on strategy over interest rate conversations. Nobody wants to have another interest rate conversation. It's rather boring at this point, and it's a little frustrating. So Dr. Seuss is just the way that I'm going to start this again, because we all have to, I could have probably started my quote with find joy. I'm finding a ton of joy in this market right now. Yes, it can be tough, but I'm finding the opportunities and the winners in this market because they are waiting eagerly to purchase a home, but they don't know how. And the interest rates are freaking them out. And they don't even want to call you. They're riddled in debt because we've seen it that consumers are increasing their credit card spending. Interest rates are going through the roof. The car loans are up. For the UAW, all the labor strikes right now, those aren't even over. So we're going to see this ripple effect of increased car prices. So we're not done seeing the increased cost of everything. So in fear, those would-be buyers or sellers that want to talk to you aren't. So how are you engaging? How are you thinking differently about being relevant to them in this space so that you can have your fair share of the reduced volume that we're all looking at right now? So let's kind of jump in then. All right. So this week alone, oh my gosh, if I had just pulled my head under the covers for the whole week. Oh, okay, there you are. I thought I lost you, Miss Megan. So this week alone, we've had war, we've had the Fed come out and speak, and we've had these technicals. So, and I'm going to do it too. I'm just going to pull up our Facebook to make sure. You guys are so patient with us this morning, so I appreciate that tremendously. All right, we're still going right along. All right. So the war versus the Fed versus technicals versus long-term investors. We're trying to figure out what this week brought us and what it meant given the interest rates, because we saw a lot of swings in interest rates. We saw the 10-year drop from 4.8 to 4.56. That's actually pretty significant because it didn't drop below 4.55, which was a ceiling that's now become a floor. So it didn't drop below 4.55, but the 10-year dropped significantly. Yet the stocks also benefited. So typically when you have this flight to safety, like we had when Israel started bombing the Gaza Strip and Gaza, well, we're not going to get into the war conversation right now, but when that started happening and it started creating fear, typically you see a flight to safety. So people pull their money out of stocks and they put it into bonds. And when we do that, that creates increased demand on bonds, which increases the price and drops interest rates because prices and yields are opposite. So when you do that, you would have expected that a run or a flight to safety would drop interest rates. So we saw a bit of that, despite some of the technicals that we were seeing that would have told you the opposite was happening. But where was it running from? Because it wasn't running from the stocks, because the stocks were doing well as well, because the stocks were doing well based on the Fed. So if all of this is going crazy, the investors are thinking the Fed might not be raising the Fed rate another quarter come November 1st. So all of this is intertwined, and understanding it so that when I get the kind of comments all over my TikTok and my Instagram feed saying that the bubble is about to burst, that home prices are about to drop, that interest rates are going to skyrocket, that I have the commentary to come against that, giving them the rationale that here's where we're at. Somebody said this morning that we have a run on foreclosures. Miss Megan, how many foreclosures did we have last month?
Out of roughly 3,000 closings that we had two.
One.
We had two.
Right. But yet it's all over social media that we've got a run up in foreclosures. So I was able to quickly comment on that about the Black Knight statistics and how low foreclosures actually are. Having this kind of data is so critical right now so that you can continue to be that beacon and light for your clients. All right, so rates became erratic this week. We actually saw a run up, then we saw a really nice drop, and the market barely even swallowed that before today they're starting to go right back up again. So we're going to talk about what just happened? What happened this week? So the economy continues to defy its challenges. We saw the job openings come out last week at 9.6, where it was actually an increase of job openings. And then we saw the jobs numbers come out double the expectations on Friday. If you talk to anyone, anywhere, and ask them if it's easy to find a job right now, the answer is probably going to be no. But that's not what the reports are saying. What the data is saying, which is what the Fed is reading, is that jobs are fine. In fact, initial jobless claims just came out this morning and it stayed flat, meaning there wasn't really an uptick in unemployment claims. So people are hanging on to their jobs, they're working out of fear, and you've got people who are companies who aren't laying off and people who are just giving up. So they're not going on unemployment right now. MBA came out this week requesting that the Fed state that they were done raising rates. They came out pleading, crying out, please stop the madness. I get the fact that you're trying to raise the rate to control inflation, but honestly, you're crushing housing. So they came out, other industry leaders came out, went to the Fed, wrote a long letter talking about the fact that we are asking for the Fed to state that they're at the end of their rate hikes and that they will know that they will consider that they were sorry, and that they will not consider selling its MBS holdings until the housing market regains its stability. And why was that important? It's just simply supply and demand. So if the Fed sells a bunch of MBS holdings or mortgage-backed securities, it creates more inventory in housing lingo, right? It creates more inventory, which drops prices, which increases the yield, because remember, they go opposite. So if I drop prices, I increase the yield. So my interest rates go up again. So they were like, please, please, please. And interestingly enough, this week, 4 Fed board members came out stating something to the effect that they thought the economy was taking care of itself, that the spread between the 10-year treasury and the 30-year fixed rate and this term premium, which what I was talking about in the beginning, we have this fight going on with long-term investors, right? We've got this war, we've got the technicals, we've got these long-term investors who want a risk premium for holding long-term investments. It's called a term premium. So the Fed was like, well, that's taking care of it for us. It's keeping our long-term rates higher, so we don't have to do the job and continue to raise the Fed rate. Those 4 came out stating that, and we saw a drop in our interest rates. That was a really nice win, but it just simply didn't last very long. We also saw that the market completely ignored that we actually had a jump in the PPI. So what is that? That's the Producers Price Index. And it jumped up pretty significantly in the headline month over month, and primarily due to, obviously, the cost of oil is increasing, but also housing was in there. Well, housing was in the CPI, but in the PPI, primarily it was around oil and it was around staffing. So when you see the increased costs of production, you would typically see inflation goes up and interest rates would go up, but that was the same day the Fed members were coming out saying that they were done raising the Fed rate. So we had this whole perception about where the interest rates were going to go long term, this desire and this flight to safety due to the wars, and then the ignorance or ignoring of the technicals based on all of the emotion going on with what was happening globally. So we also saw that they ignored a weak 10-year treasury auction. Why do I care about that? So that's a supply and demand thing again. So when we are selling 10-year treasuries, it's just like the Fed is releasing mortgage-backed securities. So when you see something like a demand slump, when you have less demand and you have more supply, again, you're going to see rates go up because the prices are coming down. And that didn't happen because the timing with the Fed board members. The technicals were kind of being ignored in the beginning of the week. We know that war ensued in Israel against the Gaza Strip. That created a lot of stress, and it continues in Ukraine. And so right now, Russia is pretty much just banking on the fact that if they hold long enough, they will ultimately win, as Ukraine will run out of money. And of course, a lot of that is happening in conversations here as we're trying to decide how much more we're going to continue to support the war going on between Russia and Ukraine. We also have a question mark on whether or not China is going to start to invade Taiwan. I mean, all of this is creating a ton of stress, which is going to continue to battle this drive towards this long-term risk premium that investors are requiring, where they want to make more money on long-term bonds, and this flight to safety, where people will move their money from stocks back over to bonds. All of that impacting ultimately your mortgage rates and the rates of your buyers, which is affecting the instability or insecurity that they're feeling right now based on all the volatility. We also so last week, the US government had a day where the debt grew by 275 billion in simply one day. And remember, during all of this, we're sending over so much money overseas to support, obviously, peace, which we want to keep doing, but at the risk domestically of running up our deficit. So the timing is not good on any of this. And of course, we have the election next year, and which will feed in, all of this will feed into who people vote for. And on top of everything, as you guys know well and clear, mortgage purchase applications are pretty flat. They were up 1%, but when you're up 1% from like historical bottom, it doesn't really feel like a win. Right now, we just know that demand will continue to be lower as interest rates are volatile and we head into the winter season. So right now, instead of throwing the blankets over our heads and our head down on our desk, we have to think more strategic. Because ultimately, creativity takes courage. You have to go beyond where you feel comfortable. It was really easy for the last 3 years for us to simply talk about a house that was for sale, getting the financing, getting the lowest rate, talk to 3 lenders, get whatever best rate you can get, and let's get you the closing table. Now it's not about quickly getting them to the closing table, but continuing to walk beside them out of fear, through education, into strategy and long-term financial success. So I want to help give some ideas for conversations that you could be having with your database as you're dripping this information, not only talking about what exactly is going on with maybe the real estate numbers or the trends, or how long somebody can expect to stay on the market, or how many bids you can expect to be up against. That's critical to being able to communicate with your buyers and your sellers, but also then showing them the strategy, the cards that you have in your hand that can help them not only win that competitive offer, or maybe understand why their house is sitting on the market longer, or why there's fear in the buyer's psyche right now, but also how do we position you for success? Because if you're not going to buy a house right now or sell a house right now, my question is when? Maybe 6 months from now, a year from now, well, I'm still going to be doing the business. You're still going to be doing the business. So let's start filling up all of our pipelines with this month, next month, and next year, because those conversations and those people need to be walked beside. So let's continue to talk strategy, right? Strategy, opportunity, long-term wins over short-term volatility. That's the trade-off. So one of the big questions that we've talked about, we've shared this spreadsheet, and I can share it again out. I love this spreadsheet because when people hang on to a 2.75% interest rates and they have $40,000 in high interest rate credit card or car loan debt, and they're not thinking about that, or especially with the student loans that just came out, and some student loans, unless it's federally backed, it's expensive. I know I have 3 kids who are carrying some student loan debt, and those interest rates are not low. So between student loan debt or car loan interest rates, which have been going up, personal loans, HELOCs, which you guys know have been going up, and credit card debt, are we looking at this from the right framework? Can I have a conversation with you that talks about, I know that you've got a 2.75% interest rate, but I also know that you're in a home that's too small, that you just gave birth to your 4th kid, or that you guys are going through a trial or tribulation or divorce, or that you guys just got married, or whatever that situation is, that home is not right. Or maybe it's an aging couple who's not in the right age appropriate home. Those conversations in the framework of how we can support overall debt is where you can actually increase that relationship that you have with that client, because I'm concerned about your overall financial health, because it not only is your home, but everything your home can do for you. So what would that look like if we did a cash out refinance, dropped off all your debt, increased your score, and we're able to move you into a more age appropriate home, or a home that fit your lifestyle? Or what if we did tap into a second loan or a home equity line of credit to reduce the cost of those credit card debts? Any one of those conversations, helping that person come out of a feeling of helplessness into a feeling of strength and stability and security. The home does so much more than putting just a roof over their head. We can also talk about, what does it look like to buy before you sell? Maybe not now. Maybe you want to take advantage of the spring. Maybe you want to sell in the spring when you think that you can get more money for your home. Remember, the market that you sell in will also be the market that you buy in, unless strategically you're going into one of the other markets that I've started tapping into, where you might be able to get a better cash on cash return, or you might be able to get not only a greater cash flow, but long-term appreciation or rental opportunities. Are you doing something today or getting into an opportunity? Where we strategize on timing is the win. So we've got 4 fabulous buy before you sell options, not just one, where we can strategically look at that and decide, is that the right option? Or do I want to stay in my current home until that opens up? You got to just meet people where they're at. Is a permanent or a temporary buy down better? So right now we're seeing a lot of builders with the forward commitments. So if somebody is not buying a new build, if they are and can take advantage of lower interest rates with forward commitments, I'm all about it. I get it. But if that's not their choice and they want to move into an existing home based on the neighborhood that they want to be in or the school district that they want to be in, what other options are available to them? Can we do a permanent buy down, knowing that I don't know how low rates are going to go? Maybe it'll go to 5.5 or 6. Can we get to 6 or 6.5? Can we put them in a position where they feel stable and safe for the next 30 years and don't have to worry about what happens? Because this might be a little bit of a longer road than we anticipated. And there's no point in putting your buyer in stress based on how quickly that needs to happen for a temporary buy down. But of course, temporary buy downs get you further shorter term. So looking at the real numbers and how much money it takes is an absolute game changer conversation that you can be having, even if they're not planning on buying right now. You're teeing them up for success so that they feel in control. Anything that you can do with any of these strategies to help your clients feel in control, even if their timing isn't right now, you're going to be serving them in the way that you're providing that kind of value, where you're always that real estate agent that they call. And then having a conversation around, what will it cost you to wait? So some people want to, you know what, my rent's not that high, I'm just going to hang out here for a minute, or I'm going to save more money. I get that all the time. Can you save up enough money to offset the appreciation that we're going to see once rates do drop? Or how about that rent that you're paying to somebody that's not you? You're helping somebody else fill their retirement, but you're not taking care of your own retirement. What is the simple principal reduction, even with a historic rate of appreciation of 3.6? And we know we appreciate better than that here in Denver, but what if you even talked about a 2% appreciation? I mean, throw that in there. What's the real cost of waiting? So you don't just think, well, it's my rent is this, because if the average rent in Denver is $2,800 or $2,850, right? And the average price of a home, putting say 10% down, is $4,000. Well, I'm gonna rent because that's how it goes. It's a lot less. But what if I looked at the overall strategy and where are you trying to go from here? And then these rent versus buy conversations specifically. So cost of waiting is one way to look at it. And then the rent versus buy actually takes into position neck and neck. So I actually had a great conversation with a couple in California. And I love this story and I'll make it quick, but she only wanted to live in this one area for 2 years. He wanted to stay longer. He wanted to buy. She only wanted to stay there for 2 years. So she was thinking, we just need to rent. Meanwhile, he's thinking rent is throwing money away. I want to buy, even if it's for 2 years. So after we looked at the numbers, the cash flow difference was significant. It was definitely in his favor to rent over buy. But by the end of the conversation, I had them literally talking back to me going, so what we're thinking about now is if we buy a rental and we live in it for 2 years, but then we hold it, we'll actually gain from, yes, a short-term cash loss, but a long-term appreciation opportunity. Because when we looked at this, the appreciation gain, the amortization, and the tax benefits just beyond the 2 years was a massive win. So I was super excited where they brought me in to just debate whether or not it was better to rent or buy, knowing that they wanted to sell within 2 years. I had them thinking that they needed to buy their first investment ever. So congratulations, they just got married. That was their wedding gift from me. So, and this is the conversations that their real estate agents love, because somebody's thinking long-term and somebody's looking to buy just not that one home, but more homes. And then, of course, get knee deep with your clients right now. Talk to them about their goals. Make sure that you know where they want to go and how you can help them. We have a spreadsheet that we send out with our Building Investment Empire class that we do every month. And I love this. We have upwards of 30, sometimes as many as 50 people in that room every single month, including high interest rate months, because the opportunity to build real wealth through real estate isn't dampened by high interest rates. It's made harder. Of course, it's harder to do it and it's harder to cash flow, but there are opportunities in other markets, and there's opportunities right in this market if you're willing to think outside the box and look at a property with a different lens on how you can split it up. All right, really quickly, the two loan news. Oh my gosh, this is the fantastic news. I sent this out on the Saturday blast just in case you guys missed it. You can now put 5% down on a 2 to 4 unit. I say now, it's coming November 18th, but it's right around the corner where you can put 5% down on a conventional loan. And what the win is FHA allows you to do 3.5%, but that chunky mortgage insurance, both upfront and monthly, never goes away. On a conventional, it does. And FHA has that pesky self-sufficiency test that conventional does not have. So you won't run into any cash flow issues where FHA requires that the rents on that property actually offset the mortgage without any income from the buyer. So it's a really, really, really hard test to pass. In fact, it doesn't pass in Colorado Springs, Aurora, or a lot of other neighborhoods. But the conventional option doesn't have that. You can get primary home interest rates. You can move into one of the units. You can live in it for a year, putting 5% down, using the rental income on the other units, and then do it again in a year. And you can do it again in a year. If you're not talking to every single one of your clients about this and partnering with the Ruth team, then you're missing an opportunity to help those clients build strategic wealth and for you to be their lifeline partner as they start to build that kind of empire. All right. And then we are using already the 2024 loan limits. It's not a huge bump. It's like $25,000, but I'll take whatever I can get. So of course, that also helps in a very expensive Denver market. You guys, please join us next week. So we've got Agent Ignite. We are going to miss Megan because I know that we love being in person together. She's going to be doing her family vacation, but we've got Ziona McIntyre coming down from Boulder. She's written a book on midterm renting. That's like 31 days to a year. That's all those short-term rentals that people aren't doing anymore. What are they doing with those homes? They can make very good revenue and have stability with midterm renting. And if you are thinking, well, I don't do midterm renting or I don't know that space, then you need to be at this Agent Ignite, because this is, again, thinking outside the box, creating clients where you might not have them today, and optimizing opportunity to build wealth. Maybe not even for your clients, but how about for you? So looking at this, I'm helping several real estate agents right now buy midterm rentals, because when you look at it from that lens, real estate in Colorado right now works. Whereas with long-term rents, it might not. With midterm rents, it is. And based on strategy and location, they're doing very well. And if you're like, I don't know enough about that, then you need to come to Agent Ignite next week. And then lastly is the next big thing. So I know Megan will be a speaker. The next big thing, First American has decided to sponsor us again, which we're thrilled about, 3rd year in a row, as we roll out some incredible speakers, all day jam-packed. You guys know me. It is all about content specific to you, what you're working through right now, and kicking off 2024 with a massive push with new ideas and creative ways to attack your business and have your best year yet. Even if interest rates stay above 7, there's nothing that says it can't literally be your best year yet. And remember, not only is First American a sponsor, but so is DMAR, so is CAR, so is RE Colorado. We have massive sponsorships behind the next big thing because they also know that this is about the opportunities that real estate agents have in this market to take advantage and to grow their business. So that kind of industry event is something that I'm excited to be a part of and to be putting on. So Miss Megan, oh, you're on mute.
Gosh, I knew I was going to do that. I just knew it.
What did it do?
I knew it. I was like, don't forget to unmute yourself and go ahead and start talking. So thank you so much for tuning in, guys. We certainly appreciate every week that we do get to have with you. And we appreciate your willingness to stay informed and on top of your game about the shifts and changes that are happening in Metro Denver, in real estate and in the lending world with Nicole and I. You will be in person only next week. So make sure that you go ahead and register for Agent Ignite that will be at Nicole's office. And then we'll have one more, our final session after that at the end of October. We'll have 1 or 2 more after that. Yeah, 1 or 2 more. Do you know?
2 more after. Oh
2
gosh,
more.
now you got me guessing. I think 1 more after that.
Okay,
Yes,
1
1
more
more.
after that for sure.
Yes.
Maybe 2. And so,
yes.
but we will be back at it live again in about 2 weeks, back in person together, going over all the graphy goodness with you guys. So let's see, questions before we sign off.
Yes.
I have a client who came in 25,000 under asking price at 1.125. And with a $35,000 in concessions for a 3-2-1 buy down. In inspection, we got a new furnace, new AC, new sump pump, new deck stairs, and water in the crawl space removed. I do feel that she is better off than had she bought in 2020 through 2022 and had to waive inspection, etc. I am certain she will get a chance to lower her rate, just don't know when. I think that's fantastic. And I'm hearing a lot of those stories right now.
Yes.
Nicole, can you get a 3-2-1 or a 2-1 buy down to 5.5% for first year, or is it higher?
So you can get to 5.55 or 5.5. I'm just adding numbers. Yes, you can, because you can do a 2-1 buy down and it'll drop you down to 5.5.
Yes. And then the request to see our slides, I will be emailing my slide deck out for download at about 1 to 2 o'clock this afternoon. Nicole will post her slides in the Agent Ignite group on Facebook, so you can go there and download her slide deck from there. But we will see you guys in person next week, not me. I'll be on vacation with my kids, and we'll see you in 2 weeks back online. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We hope to see you at our closing table soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.